Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. I'm Christina with The Muse. We are so excited to have our final webinar of 2017. We're joined today by our founder and CEO of The Muse, Kathryn Minshew, and we are also joined by Lori Sylvia, founder and CEO of Rally, who we are proud sponsors of as of this year. So before we get started, I wanted to run through a few things. Today's session will be recorded, and a link to the recording and the slides will be sent to you later today. You can find us on Twitter and join the conversation with the hashtag RM in 2018. And we love questions, so feel free to submit them in the control panel throughout the webinar. We'll leave about 10 to 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. So for now, I'm going to kick it off to Kathryn.
Wonderful. Well, I am so excited to be here. So thank you everyone for joining. Just a brief background on myself, and then Lori, I'll ask you to introduce yourself as well. I'm the founder and CEO of themuse.com, which for those of you that know us is a career platform used by over 50 million people, many of them millennials, to navigate their careers, and by hundreds of companies looking to attract, hire, and retain great talent. And our mission, and the reason why I founded the company several years ago, is really to create more meaningful connections and relationships between companies and individuals. And we really focus on this concept of fit, which we're actually going to talk more about later in this webinar. But how can you find the right match, the right alignment, the right fit between an individual and the organization they work for to make the world of work, from searching for a job to advancing in your career, much more personal? So on the employer side, we do a lot of work with over 700 companies, from the very large to the very small, to help them really articulate what makes them special, capture the core elements of their employer brand, create stories, content around that, and then distribute that throughout their recruiting channels to reach the right person, the right message at the right time. And with that, Lori, why don't you introduce yourself quickly, and then we can dive right in.
Thanks, Kathryn. I'm really excited to be teaming up with you today for this webinar. And for those who don't know me, I'm Lori Sylvia. I'm the founder and CEO of Rally Recruitment Marketing. I've been a marketer for about 25 years, leading marketing teams at a number of startups. And I discovered recruitment marketing in 2014 when I became the Chief Marketing Officer of Smashfly Technologies. And I instantly fell in love with recruitment marketing. I was there for about 3 years, and while I was there, my team and I were recognized for really helping to educate talent acquisition professionals about modern recruitment marketing practices. And so earlier this year, I left Smashfly to start a new company called Rally, which is an online community for people like you who are interested in learning about new strategies, skills, and technologies in recruitment marketing. We provide expert how-to content that you can put into action immediately. We share what's working to help each other become more successful. And we offer a mentor program because I really believe that everyone has something to learn and everyone has something they can teach. So our focus is really to help you advance in your career so that you can lead the future of talent acquisition. So again, I'm super excited to be here with you, Kathryn, and to share what I've learned from the Rally Recruitment Marketing community.
Wonderful. Well, what we're going to do today, for those of you that have just joined, is really dive in to some of the core predictions and trends that Lori and I and the networks of people that we represent see as both things that were critical steps forward for the industry and for all of us, critical learnings in 2017, and what are some of our predictions for 2018. And specifically, we're going to do our best to get really, really tactical so that everyone on this webinar can leave with a couple of notes. Hopefully you fill up a page, but with a couple of key things to do to take back to your companies and change in your day-to-day starting tomorrow, or maybe starting January 2nd for those of us that are a little bit busy finishing out the end of the year. So I'll start with the first prediction and trend, which is the idea of humanizing your brand. And this is really core to why the Muse was founded, and we continue to see as the war for great talent heats up, we continue to see candidates voting with their feet and gravitating towards companies, towards brands that both speak to them as humans, that treat them with respect, and that are humanized themselves.
Yeah, so in 2017, a key trend that we recognized was that as a community, we invested a lot in employer branding, in understanding our organization's mission, values, and culture, and then translating that into an employer value proposition. We saw folks in talent acquisition invest in upgrading their career sites to be on brand and to deliver a better candidate experience. And many of us added dynamic content and job recommendations to our career sites to really personalize the experience for each candidate persona and audience. But we all know that our employer brand is not only what we say it is, it's also what others say about us. And for a long time, I think we were reactive to employer reviews. We knew that candidates were being influenced by the reviews of our current and former employees, even other candidates. So we were really focused on reputation management. But in 2017, we began proactively shaping our reputation as an employer by bringing other employee voices forward. And so a key recruitment marketing trend in 2017 has been leveraging our employees to tell the story of our companies, of our culture, and our career opportunities. And in doing so, we made our employer brands human through the voices of our employees and their experience working for our companies. And so many of you are doing really great work in this area, so we wanted to highlight 3 that really stand out for humanizing your employer brand through employee stories. And the first example is Citizens Bank. They've created a library of 100 employee stories, which is amazing. And they feature those stories on their career site and their social channels, and also where candidates may be researching their company and reading reviews such as Glassdoor and Indeed. And I think Citizens is a great example of promoting employee stories first and jobs second. The next example is Seattle Children's Hospital. They partner with the Muse to create employee stories, not just from nurses and doctors, but from really many roles across the hospital to help attract employees who will share in the hospital's mission of caring for children. And so Seattle Children's Hospital is a great example of attracting talent to your purpose, not simply your jobs. And the third company to recognize is Digital Federal Credit Union. Their career site features employees from every department, from every level, talking about their personal connection to the credit union's values, both in how they treat their members, but also in how they've been treated by their fellow employees. It's really moving stories. And so, Kathryn, I was thinking, banking is one of those industries that can feel completely inhuman from the consumer's perspective, never mind the candidate's perspective. But all of these recruitment marketing teams are doing a great job humanizing their brands.
Absolutely, and I think we're actually seeing some really interesting innovation in financial services in general with Capital One, Wells Fargo, and a number of other brands really investing, to some of your points, in storytelling. And that kind of brings me to the next point, which is looking ahead, following this trend around humanizing your brand. In 2018, we predict that companies will really continue that focus by focusing on humanizing the candidate experience. So this is a space that has been neglected for a really long time. When we did a survey recently, we have millions of job seekers and professionals that use the Muse to navigate their career. And when we did a survey recently, the #1 thing that people found most stressful in their career was applying and not hearing back from a company. And I think we all know instinctively that this is true, but we're starting to get some really hard data about the financial and business impact that this process has on all of us. So you see it on this slide here. 73% of candidates report never having received so much as a confirmation email post-applying, and 46% of candidates that say that they've had a negative candidate experience will sever their business with your company. Now, this is, I mean, it's fascinating, but I think it's a real wake-up call for a lot of us in the industry that have been, in many cases, doing the best we can, given this flood of applications coming in and giving this, the sense that we just have to process through to find the best people as quickly as possible. But we're starting to realize that those silver medal candidates can be valuable too. And that also, at the same time, even the people that aren't right for your job still deserve to be treated with respect. I also think it's very fascinating, and we see this across many facets of HR. but candidates are becoming consumers. They are the same people in many cases that buy your products, or if you're a B2B company, they may end up in another company in your industry and decide whether or not to work with you. So I think it can be really powerful for HR professionals to open people's eyes internally to the brand impact of those candidates and individuals that don't get hired, and the impression that they may have of you as an organization based on how they're treated as a candidate. Similarly, smart recruiters in 2018 are going to continue this realization that today's rejected candidate could be tomorrow's perfect fit. So don't miss your chance at an individual forever by giving them a poor candidate experience today. There's real serious business impact. And so I think that, again, just to kind of wrap this up, as we look at the impact of making our employer brands more human, we've seen some really powerful storytelling emerge. We've seen consumers and candidates start to develop relationships with the brands, but that needs to start extending through the candidate experience to make that more human and really give it the voice of our hiring team, and using technology to communicate better with candidates at every stage in the candidate journey. Now, there's a great example of this that I want to spend 2 minutes on, which is something that Johnson & Johnson has been doing recently. Shord Gehring, who's their Global VP of Talent Acquisition and Employee Engagement, reached out to us earlier this year to partner with the Muse in overhauling the entire J&J candidate experience end to end. Now, Shord has said publicly, and he spoke at HR Tech this past year, J&J gets over 1 million applicants a year. So that's a tremendous number of people who are expressing interest in working at the business, and yet only a small fraction of those people are actually going to be hired in any given year. And so, as you can say, he was really focused on how do we make sure that the great people are nurtured and developed through the process and ultimately end up coming to work here, and the people that we say no to, how can we find a better way to say no? And so J&J partnered with the Muse. We launched in October of 2017, and it is essentially a platform that takes content and data at every step of the journey to tell a job seeker where they are in the process and what they should expect. And we're really excited to continue to invest in this area as we go forward and see what is the next phase for candidate experience. And again, how can we all humanize that part of the process so we continue to have good relationships with those people we turn down and higher acceptance rates from the people that we are incredibly excited to hire.
That's great. I mean, there's a lot that we can learn from J&J, and so let's provide a few tips for 2018. And as you look to humanize your candidate experience with the voices of your hiring team, the key point here is help candidates know that somebody is there. And so look at how you're communicating with candidates from the very beginning at the top of your recruiting funnel. The first is at the awareness stage. Is someone on your team responsible for communicating with candidates through your company's social media channels? Not just posting jobs, but sharing other valuable careers content, replying to comments, liking and retweeting with a quote to add your context. I really like what the team at Pepper Construction does with their Twitter account. They engage the community and their partners and subcontractors and also their employees, and you can really feel like someone is there. The second is the interest stage. When a candidate joins your talent network to stay in touch, what happens next? You know, Kathryn referenced this stat that 73% of candidates never get an email that acknowledges their application. And unfortunately, the same is often true when candidates join a talent network. So if you want to see an example of humanizing this experience, I recommend that you join Nestle Purina's talent network. The email message back has a team photo, and it's written in a really warm and friendly tone. The third touch point is the consideration stage. So once you start sending applicants an acknowledgement email, because we know that you totally will, what can you tell candidates to expect next in your hiring process? And if you think about it, as we ask candidates to invest more time in our process, how can we show our respect for them and their time? As Kathryn said, regardless of whether we hire them or not. So one employer to check out is Fiserv. They have a candidate resource center, and they provide a list of frequently asked questions for candidates. I think it's a great example because it's content you can put on your career site. You don't need to wait to send it by email. So I know you're probably sitting there thinking, okay, how can I possibly provide this kind of human touch, especially if I'm recruiting in high volume? And the answer is technology. I know that might sound contrary to humanizing our brands, but there's technology available to help you automate and personalize email, text, and chat communications. And we've seen candidate communication and engagement technology, Kathryn, getting more sophisticated and easier to use, and I think it's only going to get better in 2018.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's move on to our second trend, which is redefine fit. Despite all the pressure that talent acquisition is under to recruit faster, we know how important it is for the business and also our company's culture to not just hire anyone, but to hire the right candidates. And how we think about recruiting the right candidates who fit is evolving, and in a way that will bring even more value to the business. So a key trend that we saw in 2017 was that we began having a new conversation around fit. We previously thought of fit to mean fit for a job, meaning a candidate's qualifications or their skills and their experience, but our view of fit has evolved to mean fit for a company. In other words, how does this person fit with the culture and the character of a team and of the company overall? And I think that as recruitment marketers, we always want our employer brands to be represented authentically and transparently. And so this year we invested a lot in communicating our company's culture so that candidates could do their own, fit assessment and decide whether they would want to work at our company before they applied for a job. And we saw a lot of new content created showing our leaders talking about our company's mission and showing what our office environment looks like, showing how our employees have fun and how they give back to the community. And we also started being okay with showing some of our warts too, since fit goes both ways. Kathryn, you're really an expert in this area, so I'm interested in what have you seen as the conversation around fit has evolved?
Yeah, absolutely, Lori. I think that one of the key shifts that we're seeing at the Muse is this transition from culture fit to values fit. And it's important because I think that I'm actually a believer in sort of the culture, the character of an organization as a tremendously impactful thing, but too many of us in 2017 allowed quote-unquote culture fit to mean perks, to mean, the office volunteer day on Saturday. And those things aren't bad at all. They can be really fun, kind of impactful parts of day-to-day office life. But what we're seeing from top candidates across industries who are using the Muse is that they really want to know, what will it be like to work at your company on a day-to-day basis? They want to know your organizational values, your communication styles, the way that business gets done. It's almost a question of understanding how your company and organization works, not only what you do. And similarly, when hiring managers are interviewing candidates, they should be thinking about those same things. How does this candidate work versus what they've done in the past? Do their values align with the core values of our organization? This graphic here, which is something we've been using internally at the Muse for some time, is really a kind of description of, if you're looking ultimately to find the right fit, which I believe, by the way, is essential for retention, it's essential for long-term employee engagement and really development, then you have to bring, great candidates in the door. As an employer, you have to be able to be discovered and attractive to the right people, but you also have to go beyond that, and it's a question of self-knowledge. I think we expect and often will ask candidates, what are you looking for? What do you offer? On the Muse, we spend a lot of our consumer platform and our research kind of helping individuals understand who they are, what they want, and what they can offer. But that same process is incredibly helpful for organizations. And so I'm a big believer that as this conversation shifts towards values fit, companies and teams will have to get much more thoughtful about what do they want, what can they offer, and what are the core values and character of their business. Then if you go to the next slide, this really changes how we assess candidates, to my point before. When I first got into the business, the classic question was, would I want to be stuck with this person in an airport? And while that might give you a sense of whether you like that person, I think that's actually a very insufficient way to judge someone's values, someone's fit on a deeper level. And in fact, we've actually seen some very unfortunate examples where it's been used to screen out people with different backgrounds or people that are bringing a diverse perspective. So what we're seeing right now, and what I predict we'll continue to see looking ahead into 2018, is a move towards assessing values fit through questions like, how will this person accept and embrace my ideas and feedback? You know, what happens not if this person and I disagree, but when we disagree, how will we handle that? And I think that this is, it's not necessarily an easy transition for organizations to make, but I think it's a really, really valuable one, and one that can lead us to a much deeper and more productive conversation. Lori, what are you seeing?
I can actually resonate with what you've just described on a personal level as a hiring manager myself for the past 20 years. And I can say that my own personal view of a candidate's fit has definitely evolved, especially at startups where I've built teams from the ground up. I've had to anticipate my team and also the company's needs months and quarters, even years in advance. I have a no jerks rule, so of course I wouldn't mind being stuck with someone that I hired in an airport, but that's not usually when you realize there's a misalignment of values and character. It happens day to day in working together when you should be aligned to a common goal. So in 2018, we think there's a bigger role that recruitment marketing can play in helping to determine fit. In the content that you create, in the employee stories that you tell, you should look for ways to communicate your company values, not just your culture. Answer the question, what should candidates know about your company and the people who thrive working for you? So here are 4 new questions we'd recommend for your recruitment marketing content to answer in 2018 to help you and candidates determine a fit for values. Number 1, how do teams work together, both within teams and across teams? And number 2, how are goals set, communicated, and measured, and how are people held accountable for those goals? Third, in your company, how do people gain support for new ideas and initiatives? And finally, 4, what happens when mistakes are made or a project or a product fails? These are the new kinds of employee stories to tell in 2018, and it's a perfect segue, Kathryn, into trend number 3.
Absolutely. I love those questions, by the way. So I hope that those of you that are listening got a chance to write some of those down. So trend number 3 is something that I am such a deep believer in. And it's this idea that we will not be successful in advocating for values fit, in humanizing our brands, if we cannot live and advocate authenticity. So let's talk a little bit about what that means. You know, in 2017, I think as recruitment marketers, we became much better and more savvy content marketers, right? We found creative new ways to source stories, content, and multimedia from across our companies, from our employee bases, sometimes from our own teams, and we really used it effectively to market our companies and career opportunities. We also figured out how to better curate content that was already being created and shared across our companies and our industries, and then share that through our social channels. And as we were telling these employee stories, we also learned how to activate employees as brand ambassadors so that they could share our content and we could share theirs. And the thing that I think struck many of us as we were doing this, and both seeing some of the tremendous upside, but also being aware of some of the challenges, is we started to realize how little control we have, right? Because when your brand lives partially in the mouths, in the experiences, in the feeds of your employee base, that is, you know, tens, hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands of different points. And, you know, it certainly may be scary to leadership, especially people that are used to an era where you could really tightly control and manage a corporate brand. I think that as recruitment marketers, we're coming to a realization that transparency and authenticity are here to stay, and they're important to candidates. Anything else, and they see right through it, and they will vote with their feet to go somewhere else. So, you know, I think that for me, it's been a fascinating year of evolution, because content marketing is here, right? Candidates are not going to go back to the era of a simple job ad being enough. They expect to hear stories about a company, to learn about the values, to assess whether they're a fit, and to have that human connection. And particularly for those candidates that are early in their career and were raised effectively with social media as an ever-present presence, they continue to expect a high level of transparency. But genuinely, as much as this does cause change and can be challenging, I really believe that rather than being a cause for alarm, this trend can be a positive force for good. So Lori, I know you've got a lot of thoughts on this. You want to take us into some of what we're expecting to see in 2018?
Absolutely. So yes, definitely this community is becoming great storytellers and content marketers, and you're keeping it real. A couple of examples like T-Mobile posting behind-the-scenes photos of its offices, or Asana showing its fireside chats. And in 2018, we think we'll see even more of this. We're going to see more recruitment marketing content than ever before, more employee stories, more social engagement, more employer reviews, more career advice, more candidate communication. It will be content that you create, content your employees create, and content that others create about you. And as Kathryn said, part of advocating authenticity is remembering that, recruitment marketing's role isn't to control or filter the message, but rather ensure it's authentic and fair, for sure. So why is this important? Because right fit employees stay longer, they churn out less frequently, and they're high potential members of your teams. Real fit, I think, requires authenticity of the good and the bad, sharing your organization's proudest moments and also some of its challenges, because candidates that can accept and embrace the not quite so perfect you won't be surprised, really, when they join your team. And that's important because if you think about it, with the rate that candidates are talking to each other, both online and off, authenticity isn't just a feel-good word. It's really mandatory if you're going to be believable. So with all this content, you'll need to start thinking about how will you automate nurturing candidates with your content and measuring what's working and what's not. You should consider tools that help you manage your social media channels, tools that help you activate and amplify your employer brand ambassadors, and products that help you create personalized landing pages for your career site, because that's an important place where candidates are getting information and where you can communicate directly with them. And so, Kathryn, when it comes to authenticity, what else should we be thinking about?
Yeah, I could not agree more, and I love seeing all those examples of some of the work that the Muse has done and the work that many of these other companies and partners have done up on the slide, because I think you really hit it on the head. It's about understanding how do we go beyond the platitudes and the buzzwords, that we are an innovative employer committed to, team excellence, and really get into those specifics. And so I've got a couple of tips for people that really are committed and excited to be advocates for authenticity inside their organization. So 3 actions you can take. The first is really think about how do you tell genuine, truthful, and exciting employee stories with a reality check. Is this story or experience particularly unique to this one person, or is it more common or representative of what it's like working here? Of course, you can tell more individual or unique stories, but I think it's important to contextualize them and not give an impression of your organization that's not correct, especially when most of us work at companies where there are genuine, more common or representative employee stories that can be really powerful to tell. Second, I think about how you're going to position this to your colleagues. I'm not going to sugarcoat that it can sometimes take courage to stand up to people that only want to showcase the most positive attributes of your culture. And I think one way that I've found that can be very effective in countering this is asking people transparently questions like, do we want candidates who are not willing to be in this environment? And what's the repercussion if we make the wrong hire? I'll just say I was having a conversation not that long ago with a Fortune 500 company with a sort of employer branding professional. Fascinating conversation. But this individual mentioned that for one of their specific roles, they have 35% turnover. And part of it is that there is a critical requirement of working in this role that is not communicated to candidates during the interview process because people are afraid that it will scare people away. Well, it might not be scaring them away, but it's certainly causing them to leave after they've been hired, after the company has invested time in training them, onboarding them, and getting them up to speed. And so I think that we're starting to see businesses wake up to the impact of making the wrong hire, or simply a hire that that isn't the right fit for the environment. But I think that's really important for all of us to realize that that being an advocate for authenticity is going to take a little bit of standing our ground and of reasoning with people. And I would really encourage you to commit to that because the benefits and the payoffs are very much worth it. And finally, and this is just something that some of you may have heard me talk about before, but I generally believe that you should try and keep the term employer brand or recruitment marketing off of your career site and off of your candidate-facing material. So keep it internal only. And why? It's because a lot of candidates we're seeing are reacting sort of negatively to those terms. And I understand that, right? Out of the people, and again, we've got 50 million people who come to the Muse, so there's a very diverse set of opinions within there. But a lot of people, because they're so committed to authenticity, they want transparency, they don't like the idea of being employer branded to or recruitment marketed to. To them, it feels sometimes inauthentic or fabricated. And so even though I think these are actually really helpful words to use internally and within our companies to talk about these important concepts, sometimes candidates aren't feeling the authenticity, and so I would recommend that people keep those to internal only. All right, Lori, passing it back to you.
Okay, well, you just had a few keywords that I think are super important. You were talking about courage and leadership, and that brings us to our fourth and final trend and prediction for 2018, which is champion the way forward. We're in a time of rapid change in what candidates expect. I think we all feel that. And also in what our companies need for today and also the future, and in the relationships between people and their employers and the work that they do. And all of this change has placed greater expectations on HR and talent acquisition. But we have a tremendous opportunity to help our organizations adapt to these changes because we know it's about more than filling open recs. It's also about enabling our companies to hire and retain the right people so that our organizations can succeed. And a key part of championing the way forward is not only about adopting the new strategies that we've talked about today on this webinar, it's also about adopting technologies that can support our strategies and help us to work smarter. In 2017, we saw more new HR technology introduced than ever before, and the focus has been on recruitment marketing. George LaRocque produces the HR Wins report, and I think he does a great job of tracking investment in HR. And he found that through Q3 2017, 57% of HR tech investment has gone into talent acquisition. And if you dig into that a little deeper, you'll find that 70% of that is focused on top of the funnel, meaning employer branding, talent attraction, candidate sourcing, everything that we need to do to drive, to attract more of the right people to our companies and drive more of the right fit qualified applicants to our jobs. And we can't talk about 2017 without recognizing, I think, one of the largest moves in HR tech. Number one, Google for Jobs, which will transform the way candidates search for and find jobs. And number two, Google Hire, which is Google's entrance into the ATS space for the small to medium-sized business market. So, I mean, previously we saw a big move towards systems of records like the ATS and then the CRM and then more recently the recruitment marketing platform. And the focus has been on how these big systems work together, or in some cases are part of the same product suite. But with the flood of investment in HR tech and also, frankly, the maturing of HR and the TA function, it's becoming more difficult for one vendor to keep up with all the innovation that's rapidly coming into our space. We now have all kinds of specialized technology for monitoring your candidate experience end-to-end, for programmatically optimizing your recruitment advertising, for using machine learning to write better performing job descriptions, for communicating with candidates through text and chat, for measuring employer brand sentiment, and much, much more. So the question for you is to continue to be a champion for marketing-driven talent acquisition. How will you stay up to date with all of the new technologies becoming available? This is a challenge that your colleagues and the marketing team at your company have been facing for years. There's something like 5,000 providers of marketing tech. And I know it's the worst feeling when you're in a meeting and someone in leadership read an article and then turns to you and asks, you know, what are we going to do with fill in the blank? So the key is to work with technology partners who not only are bringing their own innovations to market, but who also have open ecosystems and partner strategies to play well with other providers. I know this is going to sound provocative, but you will be left behind if you don't stay up to date with new recruitment marketing technology and build your teams with the skills to leverage that new tech and these marketing-based strategies. It's not only that your careers will be left behind, but your companies will be left at a competitive disadvantage. So I know that's bold, but I think it's becoming more and more true. So
I couldn't agree with you more, Lori.
Good. We're being bold today on this webinar, Kathryn. I love it. So so then what does this mean for 2018 with all of this new technology that's come into our space? I think, you know, going back to where we started from the beginning, we need to look at it from the candidate's perspective. Google for Jobs and innovative technologies like AI will make job searching easier and smarter. And from the candidate's perspective, I think finding relevant jobs won't be hard. But Kathryn and I believe that finding the right employer will become harder. Candidates will still need information about an employer to know whether or not they really want to work there. You know, this brings us back to our discussion on fit and authenticity. So hopefully you notice a trend here. We think that brand recall and reputation will become more important as searching for jobs becomes more like online shopping. That means more investment will need to be made before your target candidates are even searching for jobs. And that's why recruitment marketing strategy will continue to be a key differentiator in talent acquisition. I saw a stat the other day from Aberdeen Group that says 33% of companies expect to increase their spending on recruitment marketing above and beyond their current investment. And that's great. It's headed in the right direction. And so why is more investment going into recruitment marketing? Because if you don't market yourself as an employer, if you only market jobs when they become available, if you don't reach candidates through digital and social channels where they can discover your brand and research your company, your competitors are going to eat your lunch. Kathryn, that last statement might be a bit too harsh, I don't know, but recruitment marketers have a great opportunity to lead the way forward.
No, I honestly don't. I mean, I don't think it's too harsh because, firstly, we are seeing this every single day at the Muse. Candidates are voting with their feet, and they're doing that by raising the bar when it comes to employers. They're also, in many cases, the best candidates are not spending a lot of time, trolling through job listings. They're reaching out to companies that are on their radar, the companies that have proactively marketed to them, the companies that do a good job engaging them and telling them a great story. And I think that that we're going to continue to see a lot of a lot of opportunity for companies that can invest and really get out ahead of this and be really creative when it comes to how they market to and engage with candidates. And I think we're going to see a lot of pressure on companies that don't have that support. And I know that's tough because, right now as talent professionals, many of us are in the tough position of having to sell this into CFOs or leadership that maybe aren't as educated about the state of the candidate market and the needs of recruitment marketing. But I think if we really want to help lead our companies into the future, it's something that we've got to try. So with that, I'll go into a couple of my 2018 tips. So again, I think as talent acquisition leaders, we need to challenge our recruitment teams on a couple of key issues. So one being, where will you market your employer brand so that you can build relationships with candidates before they're actively searching for jobs? Again, this is important because a lot of the best people, they are starting to gather information. And in many cases, we see top candidates starting to think about their next step and slowly, passively gather information up to 6 to 9 months before making a move. So they're thinking about, they're reading content, they may be visiting the Muse, looking at other career-related sites, and just starting to explore what's out there. I can say from my personal experience, before I started the Muse, several years before, I was visiting the career websites of companies that I thought might be interesting, and if they had stories and content and interesting information, I would consume it, I would write it down, and if they didn't have much for me, I would leave, and in many cases I wouldn't come back. So I think that's kind of the first key question and tip around how you're marketing your brand overall. Second is, how will candidates engage with your brand and form a positive perception of you as an employer so you're really top of mind when the timing is right? And again, this is where I think content and storytelling can be so important, because it's not just about getting in front of them, but it's making sure that they're developing a positive perception. And again, I would argue a very authentic perception. It's okay if people are self-selecting out of your process because it's not the right fit. In fact, the companies that are best at recruiting using the Muse's tools tend to be pretty clear about who they are, who they're for, who they're not for, and it actually leads to stronger relationships with people that opt in and buy in. So that's my second point. And then the third, which I think is a really great question here, is what processes and systems and products in place do you have to test new channels and tactics so that you can know what's working and what's not working as the recruitment marketing landscape changes? Now, again, this is not the most straightforward one, because the metrics that used to work for us, clicks on my job application, completed applicants, those aren't necessarily the metrics that will determine whether our recruitment marketing has been successful in the future. We're seeing companies start to look at qualified applicants. They're looking at the ratio of applicant to interview, the overall quality of the candidate. Is the candidate informed? Are they engaged? And then post-hire, many of them are starting to track short-term retention and NPS. So what can we do as recruitment marketers to think about the systems and processes that will allow us to really experiment and start to track data that we may not have had access to in the past? Again, not the easiest thing, but I think a really kind of exciting time for us as an industry. And so Lori, you want to go ahead with what this means for everyone listening today?
Absolutely. Let's bring it back to each of you out there. We've talked about our take on the 2017 trends and provided our predictions for 2018. But the most important thing in 2018, and Kathryn and I couldn't agree more on this point, is you. It's you, all of the talent acquisition leaders who are becoming brand-led and marketing-driven, and all of the people out there who are pioneering recruitment marketing and employer branding and social recruiting and candidate experience roles at your companies, because you are the future of talent acquisition. And so in 2017, we saw more people than ever before become responsible for recruitment marketing, not just part of their job, but moving into a full-time role. And you may have different titles, but your mission is largely the same, which is to market your company as an employer of choice and to generate demand for your job so that you can help your company attract and hire the best and, of course, the right fit talent. And as I've launched Rally Recruitment Marketing this year and connected with more and more recruitment marketers, I keep hearing the same thing. Many of you stepped up to create your role, and you're the first person to have your job at your company. And some of you come from recruiting and some come from marketing. But you bring new skills in social media, in content marketing, in demand generation, marketing automation, and analytics. And what you don't do is recruiting. Recruitment marketers are not recruiters. Your role is not completely understood yet by your colleagues, and so we're going to have to support one another as recruitment marketing becomes adopted more and more, not just as a practice, but also a profession. But what's great is that you get to define your role and the value that you'll bring to your organization. I think this is a tremendous career opportunity, Kathryn.
Yeah, I love how you frame that, because it's something that I'm seeing start to happen across the industry. And honestly, I think it could be the most exciting thing to happen to HR and talent in years. And so what do I mean by that? Which is, so broadly speaking, we're seeing that more resources are being invested into really marketing an organization, its values, its employer brand, not just advertising jobs. And because of this, recruitment marketing is becoming recognized as a really key pillar of talent strategy in 2018. And I think that the strategies and practices around attracting and engaging talent before you need to hire and building a pipeline of candidates who are already interested in working for your company will become a really key differentiator for your organization and a direct contributor to its success. And building on that, you know, we have been hearing for years from CEOs that their most valuable asset is their people. And yet, when you look at how businesses operate, many of them don't necessarily invest the resources or, you know, give talent and HR a seat at the table in a way that would make that statement more true. But I think that we're starting to live in a world in which the processes, the talent, and the need for HR and TA systems are starting to make that true. So, you know, we've talked a lot internally here at the Muse about how the role of a CFO has undergone a lot of really interesting changes over the last 2 decades. It's become much more of a senior strategic seat at the table. And part of that is because ultimately companies realized that one of the most critical things to their success was how they effectively deployed capital. Well, you know, what's the other thing that is absolutely fundamentally core to any company's ability to compete and grow and succeed in their market? It's their people, their talent, their creative capital. And so I think that now that people can rival, you know, capital for what really drives a company's success, HR can demonstrate its leadership role in growing the business and impacting the bottom line. And so I am very optimistic that, and I don't think it's going to happen fully all at once in 2018. I think we're still in a process that's probably going to take a few years to lead all the way through. But I think that there's an opportunity for talent leaders to really focus on core business imperatives, finding the right person for what the company needs both today and tomorrow, convincing those individuals to join this company amid heavy competition, but also making sure that they're the right people for the role and for the organization so that they're engaged and retained and aligned to achieve the company's mission. So in sum, you know, whether you work in HR, talent acquisition, or recruitment marketing, whether you're a specialist or a vice president or CHRO, I think that all of us has tremendous opportunity in 2018 to directly contribute to our company strategy and to impact the function and the way that the people in HR role is perceived in the broader industry. So honestly, I find that tremendously exciting. One of my favorite plays says, you know, it's the best possible time to be alive when almost everything we thought we knew is wrong. And I feel like, while of course lots of the things that we know are not in fact wrong, that was a scientist talking about the dawn of some of physics, I do think that there's such transformation happening, and although it can be a little intimidating, it's also such a massive opportunity to up our game. So with that, to summarize just a few key takeaways: humanize the candidate experience. We are making great progress in really bringing out the human element of our employer brands by focusing on our individual employees and telling their stories. But now the next step is to take this further and really humanize the candidate experience. You know, there are real people, all of us, behind the career sites, and our application process, our social media channels, and our email communications can reflect that if we want to keep candidates warm. So I think that's the first thing. The second is that fit is really transitioning from culture to a deeper perspective on values. And I think it's up to us to lead our hiring teams to understand that it's not about just hiring people that you wouldn't mind being stuck in an airport with. It's about who can best contribute to your company, who can you best work with, who will bring out the best in our teams and push our teams and our companies to compete and succeed. Third, authenticity is key. It has never been more important. And as the employer brand blurs more and more with your overall corporate brand and affects not just hiring, but your customers, your future partnerships, we have to be prepared for the attention that our work will receive from leadership. And this is, again, I think it's fantastic, but it's important for us to hold firm and to remain advocates of authenticity, so that, you know, as organizations, we're not afraid to show a more full and complete picture of our employer brand. For the industry is evolving with the help of new technology, HR, talent acquisition, employer brand, recruitment, marketing. These disciplines are changing faster than ever. And for us, that means that if we don't develop our skills so that we can adopt new strategies and technologies, we might not only leave elements of our careers behind, but it might cause our companies to be left behind as well. And luckily, that's one of the reasons that I'm so excited about, Lori, what you're doing, what Rally's doing, to really build a community, a professional community around recruitment marketing so that we can all learn from each other as the industry is evolving. And finally, now is the time to be bold. There has never been more opportunity for career growth in HR. And again, so many of you on the phone right now have stepped up to create a job for yourself in this new world, to propose a new strategy, to champion the adoption of a new system, to lead change management of a new process. And that is not easy. And I think it's helpful if we acknowledge to ourselves that that's hard. We're trying to change minds inside our organizations at the same time as the industry is evolving. But genuinely, your boldness and your leadership is paying off. And it's working to slowly advance our companies and to advance our careers. So I just really want to encourage people to keep going. And I know that we've got a few more minutes, so I really want to open it up to Q&A to really dig in on whether there are things that really resonated with you and what are some of the things that you see in 2018 or questions you have for Lori and I about some of the things we've shared.
Yes, and we've gotten so many great questions so far. I wish we could get to all of them, but we have about 6 minutes, so we'll try and get to as many as possible. So we can start with this first one. How do you encourage employees to share these stories with you? So this is referring to an earlier slide about employee stories and having them share their experiences.
Yeah, so I'm happy to take this one, or at least to start, Lori, if you want to add on. So I think that there are a lot of different strategies that you can take depending on the size of your organization, the engagement level. One of the things that we did earlier this year is, I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with Brand Amper, but it's an HR technology, a new company that we actually ended up acquiring this summer. But previous to that, we experimented with sending it out to all of our employees, remote, in office, etc. And it really asked them to talk a little bit about, what do they do in a typical day? What drives and motivates them? Why are they proud to be part of our organization? And this was an employee story capture technology, so it's actually a tool that allowed us to source all of these stories. But we've seen people do sort of similar work with other technologies. So whether it's using a sort of a SurveyMonkey tool, we've seen some employers sit down with great people, the sort of top talent that loves your company, that is plugged in, that you would clone if you could, and ask them questions like, what drove you to consider working here? What made you accept our job offer? When you think about what sort of person would be most fulfilled and satisfied working here, how would you describe them? I would say, though, that the more you can get specific rather than generalities, it's really helpful because, everyone says, oh, the people here are so great, or, oh, I'm motivated by the exciting work. But that doesn't necessarily get to the core of what makes you different, versus if you can get, let's say, one of your data analysts to just geek out on a project that they worked on recently and how they did it and what it meant to them, that will speak so much louder to the opportunity available at your company than a higher level statement about there being challenging work. So obviously, I am a huge fan of it's now called Brand Builder, but this tool for capturing employee stories at scale. that we partnered with and then acquired this year, but there's a lot of ways to do that, from the very manual to the low tech with with a SurveyMonkey or other survey tool.
Great, thank you, Kathryn. So this next question, how do you support or communicate to management fit while also trying to promote diversity?
So I can try to take that one. That's a tough one. But I think what we're saying here is move beyond culture fit, wanting to hang out with somebody, to values fit. And by now, if you've done work on your employer brand and really capturing the employer brand value proposition, in that process, you've had to align with leadership to capture what is our mission, what's our purpose, what are the values that we believe in as an organization. And so, encourage the hiring team and the entire talent acquisition team to incorporate those values in how you communicate and the questions that you ask. And those should be the key stories that you tell in 2018, not just about culture, but about the values, communicating those values and helping people to screen themselves in to your organization.
Great. We will see. I think we probably have time for one more question. So being a CFO and CHRO at the same time, I would like to measure ROI of humanizing recruitment. And they say they don't doubt its importance and effectiveness, but do you have any ideas of how someone might do this?
Yes. So first of all, I applaud you for asking this question, because if, collectively as an industry, if we can really crack this nut industry-wide, it is going to really, I think, unlock a lot of the power of this space. So the suggestions, I think, are to look at, depending on your systems, look at things like, so if you have a way of judging quality of applicant, that can be helpful. Some people are approximating by looking at number of applicants that go to phone screen or number of applicants that are accepted by the hiring manager. I think further down the funnel, looking at how many of your offers accept can be very helpful. That's also a really great metric to try and move, because if you can see even a 5%, sometimes even smaller increase in the number of people who you give an offer to who say yes, that's generally a sign that you've done a great job of nurturing people through the process, and that people are more likely to say yes. I also would honestly recommend extending your measurement post-hire and looking at 3 or 6 month retention, and also employee NPS if you can. So some of the most innovative companies I've seen are asking employees 30 days, 90 days, and 120 days or 180 days post-hire, things like both the kind of classic, would you recommend working here to a friend, but also in some cases, how much do you feel that the environment here matched your expectations? And that can be actually a great chance to dig in if there are things that are off or that are challenging early, but also can be good validation that you are setting the right expectations. And I believe, especially if you can get baseline data, that as companies invest in humanizing their recruitment experience, they'll start to see really positive trend lines throughout the funnel. Lori, anything else you add before we close it out for the afternoon?
No, I think that was great.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We've come right up to 3 o'clock. I wish we could have had more time because we have a bunch of great questions here we didn't get to answer, but please join us for, we'll do another webinar again, probably in the new year, and keep the questions coming. We will keep the great content coming. And Lori, thank you so much for joining us here. It has been such a pleasure. All of us at the Muse are so thrilled to work with you, and just appreciative of all the expertise you've shared. And for everyone listening, we hope you had a wonderful time, and please don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, thank you both so much. This was awesome. We will be sending the recording and slides, but yes, if you have any questions, let us know.
And feel free to tweet to all of us at @MuseEmployers or @Rally_RM. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.